Hey guys, Carl from Purple Misplace. Today I'm going to be taking a preview look at a prototype copy of Welcome to Reckoning, the second game from new publisher Wonderspell Games, this time from designer Mike Heiman, coming to Kickstarter very shortly. In this game, you find yourself in a mining town called Reckoning, where they've discovered this new sort of resource called dust that twists time and space, causing tentacles and spectral forces to overtake the town, and you need to do everything you can to survive through the madness and escape from the town as quickly as possible. Disclaimer, I was given this prototype copy for this preview, but as always, I'll give my own honest opinion as best as I can. With that said, let's head down to the table to see how this one plays, and then I'll meet you back up here to let you know what I think. To set up a game of Welcome to Reckoning, begin by placing out the locations, starting with the blacksmith homestead, the saloon warehouse, the church bell tower, and finally the assayer and mine, giving them a little bit of space because you will be placing cards out above them. Next, you're going to be placing out the health and willpower cards. For this playthrough, I will be playing a standard level game, so I will be setting both of these cards to 5, and I'll set those over here, off to the side like this. I'm going to place out the supply of dust cards. I'm just going to stick them up here in the top corner of the screen to get them out of the way. And we will take one of them and place it here next to the willpower card to show that I have one dust available to me at the start of the game. To finish setting up the play area, we're going to take the deck of event cards, removing the wagon card from that deck, shuffling this deck up, and then drawing the top 15 cards from the deck. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. And into those 15 cards, we will shuffle that wagon card that I showed before. I'll set that off to the side over here, and then we'll place the rest of those cards on top like that. And then finally, to complete setup, we do take our character card here, and this sort of player aid card as well. And I'll just set those down here. I'll move those around as needed while we play. And then I will draw my starting hand of 3 cards. 1, 2, 3. And I'll set those out over here to the side, and we'll move things around as needed. Actually, let me slide those down a little bit now because I will want space down here for any dust that I'm using during gameplay. Welcome to Reckoning will play out over an indeterminate number of rounds, during which we are going to be trying to put together a winning 4-of-a-kind poker hand in order to sort of win our money to get a ticket on a wagon that will show up into town later. So somewhere in the bottom 15 cards of this deck, there is a wagon. That wagon will come out to the warehouse here, and at that point, while it's at the warehouse, if I have a 4-of-a-kind, I can trade that for a ticket on the wagon and ride the wagon out of town. In the meantime, during the gameplay, if we ever run out of health, if our corruption means the number of used dust ever exceeds our current willpower level, or if the deck ever runs completely out of cards when we would need to draw a new one, we will lose the game. And the game is going to play out, as I said, over a series of rounds. And in each round, we're going to begin by turning over the top 5 event cards, like this. And we're basically going to be moving our player through these events chronologically from left to right, doing whatever it says on those event cards. And most of the gameplay will come out through what it says on those cards, but at any point during the game, we also have a once per round use of the character's ability as printed on the card. We can also consume dust for a variety of different abilities and or discard a card for a variety of different abilities. Again, that character ability and the ability to discard a card for an ability can only be used once per round, but dust can be consumed as much as you'd like to, remembering, of course, that if the amount of consumed dust, meaning your corruption, ever exceeds your willpower number, you do lose the game. So you should be using that sparingly as possible. So let me talk first about what the abilities are here, and then I'll show you the 5 cards that we've got out on the tableau, and I'll explain as I play how the game is going to work. So first, this is my character card, and I've got the ability Quick Draw. So at any time during a round, means during these 5 cards, I can flip this card over to sort of ignore one of the effects on the cards. So this is going to protect me from some negative things happening on a given event card once per round. Now, paying attention to this character or the sort of player aid card, this is going to walk me through all of the other things I can do. I can always consume 1 dust to remove a tentacle from a location. You'll see how that works in just a minute. Or remove a tentacle or rider from the event row, causing no effects from that card. Or to draw a card into my hand. And remember, we do want to make sure that we're paying attention to our hand, because by the end of the game, I do need to have 4 of a kind of any number in my hand. Also, as you can see here, once per round, I can discard a card from my hand to either visit a building and resolve the effect of that building, although we can't go to a building if it's got tentacles or if that building's on fire. We can also discard a card to put out fire at a location card. And again, this is once per round, so when we do that, we'll simply turn the card to the side to remind us that we have done that for the round, and at the end of the round, it will reset like that. So actually, before I get into the events, let me show you the different locations that we have. So here is the blacksmith, where I can take a card from the bottom of the discard pile. The homestead, where I can pick any 2 of gaining a willpower, gaining a health, or taking a dust. Here, the saloon and warehouse. The saloon gains 2 health. The warehouse will let me trade a card from my hand with something in the discard. And this is going to be a really great way for me to start getting the numbers in my hand that I need for that 4 of a kind. Also, the warehouse, again, is where the wagon is going to show up that I do need to catch to get out of town. Here we've got the church and the bell tower. The church is just like the saloon, only we're getting willpower instead of health. And the bell tower lets me discard a tentacle from a building. So this is a good way to sort of keep the town clean. And then finally here, the assayer and the mine. The assayer simply lets me draw a card. The mine will give me 2 dust or reduce a corruption. Reducing a corruption means I simply get rid of 1 dust that I have used already to sort of protect myself from overcoming or going over my willpower and losing the game. All right, so let's take a look at the 5 events that we have for this first round. I'll show them up close for this first round, and then for the rest of the rounds, I'm just going to read through what they do. Long Night says, first, I can consume 1 dust to discard this card and heal to full. Full being 8 health. Or I can, no, not or. Then I will lose a health and I have to place this back on top of the event deck. So this is going to keep coming out every round unless I do something about that. Next, the Flame Tentacle. This is one of the tentacles I was talking about before. First, it will allow me to visit a location, triggering the ability of that location, but then it's going to set the mine and assayer on fire, and then the tentacles will seize the homestead. So let me show you what that means. When we set a building on fire, we simply flip it upside down like this. It means I can no longer visit either of those buildings. It also means at the end of the round, if I have at least 1 building on fire, I will take 1 damage. It also, that card said, the tentacle seized the homestead, which would mean that that tentacle card would get placed here above the homestead, and would mean that from that point, I can't go to the homestead any longer until I get rid of that tentacle. Next, we've got Drastic Measures, which says I can select a location that's not on fire, and I can choose to set it on fire to remove tentacles from those buildings. So I'm basically burning away the tentacles. Next, Night Tentacles. I can take a diamond card from the discard pile and then add 1 card to the event row, and tentacle seize the assayer. And finally here, Bamboozled, which says if the wagon is at the warehouse, shuffle it back into the event deck. This is actually a bad one to see come out late game because it could put the wagon back into the event deck and sort of slow our escape from the town. All right, so let me put these back out and I'll show you how the first round plays through, moving through these cards again from left to right. I'm going to slide those down just so I have a little more space up top for the tentacle cards. Then, looking at the stuff here that's bad for me, because I do have the ability to block 1 of these things from happening, fire and tentacles is not great. An extra card in the event row plus tentacles is not great, and also losing a health and putting this back on top of the event deck is not great. Because if I put this back on top of the event deck, and then I do this to add a card to the event deck, that means that comes out again, I get hurt again, and it goes back again. I don't want that to happen. And I don't really want to consume dust to make that happen if I'm not hurting. So it seems kind of backwards, because these fire and tentacles seems worse, but I'm actually going to block that, so we'll see what happens. First, I may consume a dust to discard this card. I'm not going to. Which means I'm going to avoid the second ability. And if I avoid the second ability, that card will get discarded anyway. I'll put that here. Then we're going to visit the flame tentacle. It says I can visit a location. I want to try and get some cards in my hand. I see I've got a 10 here, and there's already 2 10s coming out. So if I can get those in a discard and find a way to get them back again, that would be great. But right now, not so much. Then I might as well just visit the location to draw a card. So we're going to go to the assayer. We'll draw a card, which is a 6 of hearts. Then it says set the mine and assayer on fire, and tentacles seize the homestead. I've got 2 6s now, which is very nice. So I'm going to actually use my ability to trash that card and get rid of that fire so I don't get hurt at the end of the round. Next, you may select the location that's not on fire and set it on fire. I'm not doing that. Then you may take a diamond from the discard pile. Yay. I got my 9 back. And then I have to add 1 card to the event row, and tentacles will seize the assayer. Then if the wagon is at the warehouse, it's not, that goes away. 4, you may visit a location even if it is on fire. I'm going to do this warehouse that lets me trade a card with 1 from discard. I'll trade that 9 of diamonds for the 10 of hearts. No, the 10 of diamonds, because that's going to prevent the wagon from getting shuffled back in. Plus it gives me a second 10, which is good. Then add the top card of the discard to the event row, and tentacles seize the saloon. That's nice because that 10 there doesn't really hurt me. Again, that's the one, something that's not on fire, burn it to remove all tentacles. I'm not going to do that. That's the end of the first round. This flips back over. This rotates back. Nothing's on fire, so I don't get hurt. We can only have a hand of 5 at the end of any round. I have 4, that's fine. We move on to the next round. All right, Spectral Rider says draw a card. Yes, please. And then lose 2 health or 2 willpower. Yeah, I'm going to block that. So that goes away. Like that. Now, 6 says you may discard a card to visit a location even if the building has tentacles. Yeah, I'm going to discard a card to go to the assayer and draw a card. Ooh, that's another 10. So I got 3 10s and the other 10s in there. We know that's great. Lose 2 willpower. I might as well. For 3. That goes away. You may discard a card to decrease your corruption. I don't have any corruption, so I don't care. Then it says discard the top card of the event deck. If it's the wagon, shuffle it back. It's not. That card gets discarded. This card goes away. Pulsing Tentacles. Lose health or willpower, whichever you choose. No, whichever is lower. That's not good. All right, so this is going to drop to 2. And then Tentacles seize the bell tower, like that. Finally, I can visit a location. Well, I'm going to visit the location that lets me get to willpower back again, so I'm back to 4. And then Tentacles seize the assayer, double tentacles, and I lose 2 health, like that. Nothing's on fire, no damage taken. We deal out 5 more cards. And this flips back over. All right, you may draw the top card of the discard pile, sure. Then set the mine and assayer on fire, like that. Which right now is not a huge problem. Shadow Rider says gain 1 dust. And then lose 2 willpower, no thank you. I am going to block that. Then you may visit a location. I'm going to trade a card from my hand, this 2, for that 10 that I was looking for before. Like that. So now I have a 4 of a kind. If I can hold on to them and set the saloon and warehouse on fire, Tentacles seize the mine. Hold on a minute. Hold on a minute. I'm going to retcon that for a second because the next card also says I can visit a location. So I'm going to say that what I just did was the location from this card. I'm actually going to use 1 dust. And I don't have space for it right now. Use 1 dust to get rid of that tentacle from the event row. Because I don't want the saloon and warehouse on fire. All right, so I visited the location here to do that swap that I just did. Church and bell tower on fire. And Tentacle seized the church like that. All right, so I am going to use a card, tapping this to unburn one of these. And I don't really care which one it is right now. Like that. Now, Ambush Riders, add the top card from here. You can't avoid the effects. Well, I can't anyway. Ah, this is horrible. You may discard a card to remove the next card from the event row. There isn't one. And then any location next to a location on fire is now also on fire. So these 2 are also on fire. That's not good. All right. That goes away. We do have lots of fire, means I do take 1 damage. I need to work on healing up or I'm in trouble. This flips, this flips. We put out 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hey, there's the wagon. All right, so when you draw the wagon, let me make some space here. The wagon instantly goes to the warehouse. And then you're going to shuffle everything else together and start up a new round, like that. Sorry, shuffle the discard and event cards. So I'm going to shuffle everything back together. And again, we have to escape now before these cards run out. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay, then I need to use this already to discard a card to make sure that this is not burning. Because if it's on fire, I can't get to the wagon, but now it's not. Then Shadow Rider says, gain a dust. Lose 2 willpower. Yeah, even if I lose 2 willpower right now, I'm still not below a 1. So we're going to go to 2. That goes away. Then you may draw the top card of the discard pile. I will. Set the mine and assayer on fire. It already is. Now, draw the top card from the discard pile again. Lose health or willpower. No, I will flip this so that doesn't happen. Because now it says, you may discard a card to visit a location, even if the building has tentacles. It doesn't. And I just got extremely lucky because discarding this 7 allows me to visit the warehouse where there is a wagon. And I've got 10, 10, 10, 10. Visiting the wagon with my 4 of a kind, getting my ticket. I am now off on that wagon, headed away from town to safety. And I successfully completed the game. Now, while we're here, I do generally like to take a look at the components. This is a prototype copy of the game, but from what I can see, it looks like a pretty well-made, fleshed out kind of version of the game. All of the artwork looks clean and finished to me. The cards are already a linen finish. I don't know if there'll be better quality in the published version. I can't really talk about the quality of stuff here again because it's a prototype. I don't have any information about the packaging for this game either. But just looking at the game, I love the way that things are looking. The dust cards, the sort of tracker cards here are very, very clear, poppy icons that are very easy to understand and to see what's going on at a quick glance with these numbers. The deck of cards is really cool because they are a deck of cards with the sort of number and suit in the corner. And the back of these is really cool, this sort of eldritch horror design on the back of what looks like a sort of traditional playing card. Really looks great to me. The artwork in this game is gorgeous. This really looks like it comes from a sort of comic book representation of this world, and realistically I would love to read a comic book that is in this sort of setting, because this sort of weird West setting is a really, really cool one, and I just love the design and the look of the characters in this game. The same thing with the buildings, sort of clean buildings. Sorry, it's a little crooked. Clean buildings and on fire buildings. I just really, really, really love the artwork, the design. The visuals of this game are great. So that's basically all I can say about the components. Meet me back up top and I'll let you know what I think about the game itself. Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed the playthrough. So here we go with a second crowdfunded game from Wonderspell after their success with Harsh Shadows last year. I previewed that one as well and had quite a bit of fun with it, so let's see if this one excites me as well. One more thing I do want to talk about before I talk about how I feel about this game is that Wonderspell sort of puts themselves forth as a company who makes a game sort of in a standard card deck size that not only is a fun game, but also brings in a sort of film kind of thematic flair to it, and it feels almost as if you're playing through a movie of some kind. And do I think that they succeeded in this game? I have to say yes, very much. Before I talk about how I feel about the gameplay itself, the theme here, the feeling here really does feel like I'm fighting off these forces, dealing with this bad stuff that's going on, trying to ultimately achieve some kind of goal to sort of escape with my life. And as I mentioned in the components piece, the artwork and the design in this game really does help to pull you into this sort of world of this sort of Wild West mining town that's being overtaken by eldritch horror kind of stuff. And yes, I definitely feel that there's definitely this kind of cinematic quality to this game as Wonderspell is trying to put out in all of their games. So with that said, how do I feel about the game itself? I enjoyed this one quite a bit. It's quite a bit of fun. Again, this is a single deck of cards, and there's quite a bit of game in here for just being a deck of cards. And the way that it works is really, really interesting one to me. This is kind of one of those pandemic kind of style dealing with potential threats that are constantly growing and attacking and growing and attacking, and doing your best to sort of keep those to the side as you're working on some kind of personal goal. In this case, collecting a 4 of a kind and surviving until that wagon comes out, and making sure that that wagon is protected so that you can hop on it, using your ticket and getting out of town. And the way that this works in this game is really interesting because you've got quite a bit of different ways to mitigate what's happening, and most of the cards that are coming out in those event cards every round are generally offering something that is potentially positive at the same time as it's also offering something deadly or some kind of threat that you have to take care of. Right? Those tentacle cards go onto those locations, and those locations are going to be really important in keeping you alive and also cycling the cards through your deck so that you can get the right hand of cards in order to get on that wagon and get out. So managing those tentacles and using the dust to remove those tentacles, or those spectral riders, the riders that are in your event row as well, are going to be sort of attacking you, causing you damage, making you lose health, making you lose willpower. And then ultimately everything, all of the bad stuff working together is also going to start setting fires to the buildings, which also is going to hurt you, in addition to making those buildings inaccessible for their abilities or for what they're offering for you when you visit them. And Yes, some of the stuff that you do to mitigate that is coming out in the cards that themselves, in those event cards that are coming out themselves. But you also have to think about and plan, when do I flip my character card every round? Which of those horrible things will I prevent? And then deal with the other horrible things. Sometimes you really don't want to take the damage. Sometimes you really don't want to take the willpower. But sometimes it's more important to take some of that damage and then use some of the buildings to get rid of that damage so that something else isn't caught on fire, so that something else isn't destroyed or blocked off by these tentacles. And there's really this interesting pattern, starting first with just that character ability about which of these cards do I sort of negate every round. And then you've got the ability to spend dust to remove tentacles from locations, spend dust to remove tentacles or riders from the row. I didn't do any rider removal this time, but that's definitely there as an option. You've got the ability to use dust to draw a card because remember, ultimately, while you're getting rid of this stuff or dealing with these threats, if you just keep dealing with the threats the whole time, you're never going anywhere because you can't leave this town until you get that 4 of a kind. And there is no real easy way for you to just take a card into your hand. You've got to find ways to interact with the locations and to use dust to sort of refresh and roll these cards through your hands so that you can start matching them up and pairing them up to get that 4 of a kind. And I thought that's a really cool system here because not only are you trying to figure out when and how to do these things, but the two main ways that you're doing these things is number one, again, using the dust, but the dust is hurting you. The dust is corrupting you, and the more dust you use, the more likely you are going to be corrupted to the point where game over, if your dust ever goes above that willpower. So not only are you watching your health decreasing and your willpower decreasing, but you're also watching your dust increasing because that's a sort of track that swaps, right? If the willpower comes too low or the dust goes too high or they sort of meet in the middle and go just a little bit too far, you're in trouble. So you've got to be really careful with how and when you're using the dust. And if you can take damage, or if you can have a threat that sits there that you don't care about, that's not hurting you in any way, but it's just annoying and you work around it, that's probably the best way to do it because, again, you don't want to use the dust if possible. Again, the other thing you can do is throw away a card during the round, and throwing away the card is going to be able to put out fires, right? And that's going to really help prevent damage, but also keep those buildings accessible. But more importantly, getting rid of a card is going to let you access the buildings. And accessing the buildings is how you increase your health, how you increase your willpower, how you deal with corruption, how you get rid of some of those tentacles. But most importantly, there are two spots that let you deal with or interact with the discard pile, and another spot that lets you draw a card. Because again, remember, the main sort of core here is not necessarily the threat mitigation. Because if there's a threat there that you can deal with other things while that just continues to be there, so be it. Because ultimately what you need to do is get those 4 cards. And focusing on how to get those 4 cards while not allowing the threat to be too intense is exactly the core of this game. That 4 cards is everything. And if you can't get those 4 cards, you're not going anywhere. But if the threat gets you while you're aiming for those 4 cards, you're in trouble. Now, also, I do want to point out here that the game is not as easy as it may have looked in this playthrough. This is the first time that I've won quite so easily as I did here. Very often, it's going right down to the end of time. I think one thing that I was smart with this time is I had that card in my hand that cycles the wagon back into the deck, because very often the wagon gets taken away, and I got to wait for another one to come out. And as the timer's going, more threats are hitting, but very rarely have I won by the threats, because I focus on those threats. Very often where I lose is the game ends. I run out of cards before I have my 4 cards to get on that wagon and leave. Because often what I do is at the beginning of the game, I look at what I have in my hand and I pick a number and I say, that's what I'm focused on. And very often that's probably a mistake, and really what I should do is pay attention to what I can cycle into my hand and worry about that later in the game while setting myself up to sort of have more cards or have a better way to deal with the threat before I focus on collecting those cards. And a few times I've either won or lost right at the very end of the game. I've actually had 2 wins where it happened in the turn that I put out the last card and I just barely made it out. And that really does add to that sort of cinematic feel of, yeah, I'm fighting, and shoo, I made it out and I escaped before the world exploded, basically. So there's definitely quite a bit of in intense situations. It does really feel like you're fighting and you're scraping and you're holding this sort of evil force at bay until the point where you're able to get out and escape. So what can I say negative about this game? There's nothing instantly that jumps out to me and says this is bad, but this is the kind of game, now granted it's a single deck of cards, the goal is sort of the same every time, and it might eventually start to get a little bit samey. But I'll say the same thing about this that I say about every small card game, is that it fits on a shelf or in a bucket or in a box or wherever you keep your solo games, and it stays there. It doesn't take up that much space. It doesn't take up, any room in your collection, and it doesn't need to get played always and always and always and always, because the other nice thing about these small card games is they tend to be pretty cheap. So what that means is it's there, and if I want to pull it off and I want to play it, even if I get tired of it, even if it gets samey, I throw it on the shelf, and a few months down the line I pull it back off and it's new again because I haven't played it in such a long time. So I don't judge these small card games so much the same way that I would judge a big board game as far as sameness goes, just due to the nature of what the game is. But there is that. This game does tend to feel somewhat similar each time. But the order of things come out differently, the threats come out differently. Each card does different things, so depending on which cards I'm holding on to try and get that 4 of a kind, different cards will be cycling through the deck, causing different kinds of problems to me along the way. So that is very interesting. It would be kind of cool to see in the future if they have different characters with different abilities that came out, or different kinds of threats that might jump in, as a more rare thing that causes more damage, or a unique sort of ally or assistant or something that gets thrown in rarely to help you in some unique specific way. But also one small thing that could help with this, and I don't know what kind of testing or how much testing or where the design comes from, but the idea that a 4 of a kind is the only hand you can get to escape seems a little bit limited to me. And it might make the game too easy if that wasn't the case, but it could be real fun to see a flush. If I got 4 of the same cards, or 4 of the same suit, maybe that's too easy. Maybe 4 of the same suit in order, or just 4 cards in order. I would like to see if there was 2 or 3 different kinds of hands that you could do, that you could get to escape, rather than focusing on 4 of a kind every time. Because by focusing on 4 of a kind every time, it sort of puts the same sort of thinking pattern in my head as I'm trying to do the same thing every time. And if I had another 1 or 2 choices like, oh, I see that this 4 of a kind's not working, but hey, here's a 3, 4, 5, 6 of the same suit that I might be able to grab onto. It's going to work better than this 4 of a kind this play, but maybe next time that 4 of a kind works better. I'd love to see some small twists like that in the game to see if it could just make things a little bit more varied every game. But otherwise, again, small portable game, stick it in your pocket, go wherever you go. I love these kinds of solo games. This especially because this one's got a real sort of goal that you're aiming for, real hard end game triggers. It's not a beat your own score kind of thing. You really are succeeding or not succeeding based on what you're doing in the game. And it feels really good when you succeed. I had a lot of fun with this game. If you feel like this is something you might be interested in, definitely click the link below to check out the Kickstarter campaign. If it's not live, go sign up to follow it. If it is, check it out, read through it, see what you think. I hope this video was helpful. I hope that it gives you some idea of how the game plays and the pros and cons about the game. If you enjoyed it, I ask, as always, please like, subscribe, and click the bell icon below. It really does help out the channel. I'll see you all real soon. Thanks.